Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the West Coast Davengers. I'm your host, Dave. Today, I'm bringing you another retailer roundtable. If you remember from last year, I had a few comic store owners on the program to talk about the state of things and kind of get some insider baseball onto owning a comic shop. Well, this one is going to feature Jeff and Django from the Comics Place up in Bellingham, as well as Aaron from Now or Never in San Diego. Before we get into it, don't forget to hit the like button. If you're not subscribed to this, hit the subscribe button. It's right there. And it's always comic content every Sunday morning. And I have a live sale every other Wednesday called West Coast Wednesday. Drop a comment down below. Let me know. Shout out maybe your local comic shop. Maybe we can create a great little comment section of love for comic shops, because you're here because you love comics. I'm here because I love comics. So without further ado, the 2025 Retailer Roundtable. Hello, friends. It is time for a Retailer Roundtable. I'm bringing you once again some great stores across the West Coast, because this is the West Coast Avengers. I don't need to touch the East Coast. And we're gonna talk about the state of the union and comic shops and what's been going on. So why don't I let the individuals introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their store? Aaron.
Oh, I'll go first then. My name is Aaron. I own Now or Never Comics in San Diego. We've been open for a little over 6 years now. I'm from the East Coast originally. I hope that won't get me kicked off the show. I came from Boston, where I had worked at an Eisner Spirit of Retail winning shop, Kamikaze. Had been with them for 10 years before moving out to San Diego. And I was baffled that there was not a shop downtown in San Diego. So we're the only shop within 5 miles of the convention center. And we are just now starting to gear up for a Comic-Con prep for this year.
We have returning alumni over here.
Oh, returning alumni. I'm Jeff Figley of Jeff and Django fame. We own the Comics Place in Bellingham, Washington, and a small little upstart POS business called Comic Shop Assistant that we're pretty proud of.
Yeah, our shop is, I guess it's 46 years old, 47 years old. Jeff and I aren't that old, so we've only been involved for about 10 or 11 years.
Currently, we're looking at two 80-year-old men that have owned a shop for 46 years.
Comics keep you young, Dave.
Yeah, last year we talked a lot about, whatever topics I could think of that were important for people to know. And I think it's good for the comic fan, the comic reader, the comic collector to know, how things are going in comic shops, because as we've all heard, as nerds from birth, comics and comic shops are dying, and they have been forever. It's the slowest death in the history of anything. But let's start off with, we're only 4 months into the year, but it has been quite a eventful year in comics and as well as comics news. How are things going just overall, with the shop? We'll start with you guys, Jeff and Django, because you just moved to a new location.
I can't wait to hear from Aaron about how his business is doing, because what's the phrase? Rumors of my death have been greatly exaggerated or whatever. Comics are dying so fast that it almost is impossible to notice it, because things are going so smoothly. It's interesting to me how that's kind of a thing that people are always talking about, right? But in terms of the 12 years that I've been at my comic shop, I feel like we're in one of the best periods that I've seen in my 12 years there. Definitely top 3 between the Absolute line and the Ultimate line. Image Comics is a company I love, and it seems like they pretty regularly kind of move and sort of stops and starts. And I think they're coming out of a kind of a lull period and are releasing some really good stuff. And then you've got publishers doing things like the EC reprints, new EC books, Distillery exploring with interesting publishing dimensions for products. Our business is doing well, and I'm seeing more excitement and new readers coming into our store right now than I have in quite a while.
And I've got numbers that I just looked up a couple days ago, not to be the brain to Jeff's heart, but we had, let's see, single issue comics are up 25%, I believe, over last year. Trade paperbacks are up 35% for us.
Wow.
And the only thing in our top tiers that are down are back issues, and I would attribute that mostly to me being too busy to really do the back issue dance. Like, I've been putting them out, but I haven't been doing it as often as I used to. So
Okay.
those are down, 8% or something. Which,
Yeah, we refer to his back dance as milking the whales. He prices the issues, but he's got to tickle the whales to get them in to notice the new issues he's putting out.
I understand that term better than you know. And Aaron, how are things down in San Diego? Speaking of whales,
it has been so unpredictable. We started off the year with a bang up January, and Q1 is usually so quiet, like rebounding off holiday stuff and before big releases start coming out. So I had planned for a quiet start to the year, and January was a real strong start, and I was like, oh great, it's going to be an awesome year. And then February was our second worst month in 5 years. I said, oh, great. It's going to be an awful year.
Comics.
and then March is our best non-Comic-Con month ever. And I was like, okay, now I officially have no idea what's going to happen. So from month to month, it feels like we're, expect the best, accept the worst, trying to brace for whatever happens, whether it's with distribution stuff or Diamond or tariffs or whatever, like just kind of batten down the hatches and do the best you can. But for the moment, like we're happy with the books that are coming out. I think in addition to the strong books that are coming out right now, there's such a strong backlog of releases now that Marvel's getting a little bit more diligent about Marvel's Epic collections. The DC's Finest stuff and the DC Pocket Size collections, those are really helping. So even if there is a lull in new stuff, there's still so much good back matter that I think they are making more available now than they have historically.
And another thing that seems pretty awesome is that with a lot of the things that are popular right now or the big books coming out, it's dipping into a creator base, both writers and artists, that is not the really typical writers and artists that like the big two or big three will be using, which is really exciting because it's one thing to get books that are seeming excited, but when we're getting new writer voices like Dennis Camp doing stuff kind of for a variety of publishers right now, as well as artists like, Javier Rodriguez getting to be on an Absolute book is amazing. Hayden Sherman, like somebody we've been so excited about for like 2 years, finally getting the recognition he deserves. So like, it's very exciting to be dipping in or kind of graduating a new class of comic creators to the high profile books.
Yeah. And, one of the things I was going to ask right after this, and I know you're going to agree with me when I mention the one, any big surprises of the year? And I would imagine that everybody's going to cite Martian Manhunter, Absolute Martian Manhunter is the most recent big surprise. But anything coming out of left field that you, as took a chance on, or something that you saw coming that's outsold your expectations, that, sold out on Wednesday or something like that?
I mean, in our store this last Wednesday, I think the Daredevil, what is it? Cold Day in Hell? Yeah. That took us by surprise.
McNiven's been quiet for a while, and I think that him coming back with something like that makes a big splash.
This looks so different from his traditional stuff, though. Like folks coming from Civil War that knew this kind of glossy, big blockbuster style, and coming in, and it feels almost like Cam and Coley. Like it's so detailed. It's so gnarly,
kind of grandpa style.
Yeah. He's been showing originals off on his Instagram for a bit, and it's just like it looks, some of the gnarly stuff he did in Old Man Logan. That it's more towards this than, you're right, Civil War. Anything for you, Aaron, that recently?
I've been consistently shocked by the enduring popularity for IP driven stuff. That was definitely one of our biggest hits last year. Ninja Turtles and Transformers are two of our absolute biggest books. Part of that was kicked off like during Comic-Con. Like we were able to get Jason Aaron into the shop, and we did that the IDW pizza party.
Right.
And so for it to launch day one of Comic-Con for us, we started huge, and so.
Yes.
Even with the drop off post Comic-Con, we just started so big that, starting with 500 copies, you still end up landing safely at like 100, 125. So that stuff has continued to sell. But a lot of the smaller IP stuff, like even Powerpuff Girls, like we have more Powerpuff subscribers than we do Avengers subscribers.
Wow.
Shout out to the Powerpuff Girls.
Dick Tracy is outselling Fantastic Four. Like it's been wild seeing how much interest there's been in that the micro IPs.
Yeah, I mean, and on that note, I think that like the big two specifically are doing some really smart moves in some IP driven things like Justice League Sonic, Soul, like, and then the Godzilla stuff. Those are the two. These are these like things that I remember liking when I was a kid, but I was out of touch with how much those properties have been able to lock in a fan base in the kids right now. So like
TMNT Naruto along those same lines as well.
Totally.
TMNT Naruto.
Totally. Yeah. So, good work, Sega, whatever you're doing with Sonic. Like people, it's huge.
Well, people forget that Archie book went 200-300 issues, didn't it?
It was long, yeah.
Yeah. So there's always, and then the movies have proven that this character that was kind of neglected across the board for decades has legs, really fast legs, clearly. And so and let's give a shout out to comic book savior Daniel Warren Johnson. You mentioned Transformers. Yeah. We all love him. But I like he's one of those voices that is super unique, bringing people in, whether it's a licensed book, like Transformers, an IP, I mean, or The Moon Is Following Us, or any of his other amazing books that he's working on. Now, have you guys all seen a rise in interest in indie stuff over, let's say, the last year, especially with Distillery, like you said, with the horror stuff that's happening? What's the other anthology that Ennis and Clunan were on?
Oh yeah, Hello Darkness.
Hello Darkness. It seems, at least in the circle that I'm in and the people that I talk to at comic book stores, like the indie stuff is really starting to show its strength over the big two stuff.
I think the trick. Oh, go ahead, Jeff.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, our Image and Boom numbers, if I were to predict, have remained in amount static, but the publishers below that, I'm seeing an increase in stuff. So like Oni, Mad Cave, Dark Horse, like all of them have been putting out some really interesting stuff. Like the Mad Cave book Spectrum is amazing. Django and I both love that. But like, yeah, we're seeing people, especially with, like Beneath the Trees doing what it did, like getting Horvath out there. Like, yeah, there's readers and collectors alike seem to be looking at those publishers as a place where there can be value, pulled from it. Image and Boom are still like big high ones for us. Especially the Energon stuff.
We kind of saw that start changing about a year ago, where like the creator owned comics that Image had been putting out started kind of filtering out to other publishers. So like we used to have Marvel, DC, Image, and everybody else on racks in our store. And about a year and a half ago, we realized that the everybody else was starting to creep into the Image quality level.
Yeah.
And the creators were kind of being a lot freer with where they were publishing. So we actually zippered all of the others into the Image section, or put Image back in with the others section, because the quality and the creativity was there.
Yeah. No need to separate.
Yeah.
Interesting. We've got stuff more carved out. Just thinking about store layout, we've got stuff divided by genre. And so we've got a Marvel and DC shelf, and then we've got, sci-fi and fantasy and horror. And we're absolutely selling more off of those shelves than we are, or than we have historically.
Aaron, are you referring to your graphic novels or your weekly issues?
Graphic novels.
Okay,
Yeah,
because we do
that's us too.
genres for our graphic novels as
Oh,
well,
wow. That's
and
right.
it's just the issue separation is where we're at: Marvel, DC,
Got it.
and then
Got
other.
it.
But yeah, right before the pandemic is when we switched to genres,
Smarter.
and it's just easy. You know, like we take for granted how much we know working in comics every day. So like, oh, it's a Sanskai book that's Usagi, it's going to be IDW, but like other people don't know that, and they don't need to know that. So genres.
No.
That was something that I was really anxious about when we first opened, because every shop that I had ever worked in, it was just all alphabetical, A through Z, anything you were looking for, which I think is great if you know what you're looking for. But if you don't have an idea in mind, if you're coming in and you're like, I liked Game of Thrones, I want something that's like that, or I'm really big into like A24 horror movies, do you have anything like that? It feels like it's so much more conducive for discovery. So we end up landing a lot of new folks with genres. And I think, knock on wood, in the 6 years we've been open, no one's complained about it. But I was initially like super gun shy, like, no comic shops really do this. But it's how every bookstore in the world operates. It's how every record store has their stuff arranged. Like
Our staff pushed back pretty hard. Although just listening to you speak, I'm like, oh shit, like an A24 section is like
really
smart idea.
and it needs to be headlined by the book over my shoulder here, Samna.
Yeah.
Yes,
It's an A24 comic.
It 100% is. Yeah. Well, I think the testing to what you guys are saying about genre, which I never really consciously thought about it, because I don't think about it because my brain is sorted by genre anyway.
Right.
We have become as niche consumers of art. We have become genre specific. And so you're right. Comic stores should follow suit with record stores. It should be genre.
Yeah. I mean, you saying that, Dave, kind of makes it lock into my mind the progression of it, because like for a long time it was like Marvel or DC, and so much of a comic fan's identity was sort of wrapped up in either Image, Marvel, or DC. And you get that question, or at least I do, a little bit less than I used to, of like, are you a Marvel or DC person? But it makes sense that we would have this emphasis on publisher coming from that spot where comics were. But yeah, I would say, since the 2000s and kind of the 2012, and the boom with Image there, you can really start being more granular with genres and things kind of fitting into that.
Yeah.
It's interesting how much of that timeline also lines up with the proliferation of trade paperbacks.
Totally.
That feels like a perfect opportunity to now, like, we can shelve this stuff like
a bookstore.
We can make this stuff more readily available instead of having to dig through back issue bins. It's just a totally different way of shopping.
Yeah.
That's an interesting, like when I started working at the comic shop, because like Django mentioned, we're like the fourth generation of owners of it. And I started there like 12 years ago, and there was just like kind of one double shelf of graphic novels. And so one of the first thing I wanted to start doing was boosting graphic novels. But because the store's been open for 40 years, yeah, you're totally right. I take for granted that kind of not long before I started working at a store, graphic novels were really coming into vogue, as the way to collect those things.
I wanted to ask about two specific publishers that nobody mentioned. One in the IP. Do you guys see, and I see it a lot because I'm in the original art world, and the owner, Nick Barucci's in the original art world. Dynamite is all IP pretty much. Have you guys seen a rise in that? And they got Thundercats, Silverhawks, Vampirella. I'm forgetting a bunch, but Thundercats seems to be the biggest one. Are you seeing people look for that stuff?
Herculoids. You missed Herculoids.
It's interesting because Thundercats #1 like made a pretty big deal about how many copies they sold. It's hard to really think about those numbers specifically because Dynamite is a very unique publisher with the number of covers that they put out. And so you're tapping into a market that is slightly different than maybe like your average DC person, because you're having people pick several variants of a comic that they want. And so it made sense that after issue 1, those numbers did kind of go down pretty significantly. We stock all that stuff. It's pretty much the only Dynamite stuff that we're stocking right now. Usually the first 2 or 3 issues of it, we have a reasonable number of people getting it, but by about 3 or 4, it's down to a very kind of specific couple people, and they're kind of getting a lot of that line.
That lines up almost exactly with where we're at. It's a, and I won't say this derisively, like it's a line that we will sell to collectors, not to readers. We will see, instead of the traditional issue 1 to 2 drop off of 50%, we'll see probably closer to like an 80 and 90% drop off from 1 or 2 for almost all Dynamite titles. I think the only stuff that we stock in trade is the more recent Space Ghost stuff.
Right.
We've had a few folks coming in looking for that long term, but it's very rare that we'll have folks subscribe to those and sticking with that ongoing, even though we do a lot with vintage toys.
Sure.
So we have like a dedicated Silverhawks audience. We have a Thundercats audience,
Nice.
But they're not as interested in jumping over to the book long term. We'll get a lot of interest in specific cover artists like Mark Spears doing a lot of the covers.
I was literally just about to ask Dave about that.
Yeah.
Since we're talking about Dynamite, can you, like, we see creators, like Momoko, like kind of create a big collector following rapidly. Yeah. Mark Spears, though, like all just kind of happened off my radar. Can you get me up to speed with what's going on with him?
Here's my theory, and I can honestly say I'm not a huge fan of his. But here's my theory. Wildly popular is Alex Ross. Alex Ross doesn't do monsters. Mark Spears, monsters, boom.
Right.
That's all it is. Like it's the horror people that love it. It's the people that appreciate what Alex Ross does, and a guy that's doing like 25% of the work that Alex Ross does.
He's also very smart in the way he's selecting not just projects, but like he's doing a lot of homage covers.
Yes.
And so it's not just the monster audience, it's also the homage audience who want the Amazing Spidey 300 or the New Mutants 98 or the Infinity Gauntlet. We just had gotten in a first print of the Mark Spears Monsters #1, and it was the Infinity Gauntlet homage. I was like, it came out 4 or 5 months ago.
Yeah.
Let's see where this is at. And it's like $150.
It's crazy.
Like it happened so quickly.
It'll cool.
It's really, really surprising.
Yeah. It'll cool off eventually. I mean, everything that gets hot in comics, for the most part, I shouldn't say everything, but a lot of things, they get supernova and they come down.
Totally.
And the whole thing is can you, as the artist, can the artist stay original enough to stay relevant long enough? That's why Peach will continue to be the queen of everything, because she does something different. She can do some horror inspired stuff that you haven't seen on a Marvel book. It's why Alex Ross, even though he doesn't do a ton of technically different stuff, the Timeless covers, he had never done anything like that before. And so that's why they went apeshit, because they are beautiful pieces of work, and then, so I do want to ask about this, and I'm actually going to have him on my podcast next week, but Dinesh from Bad Ideas touting
nice. Love Dinesh.
Yeah, Dinesh is great, and we're friends, and it's always fun talking to him, but I want to pick his brain about the direction he's taking Bad Idea. And Planet Death, he's now saying, is getting close. That preview Ashcan book is getting close to 1 million copies. And I know he's selling it for what, 20 cents a book or something like that?
Yeah.
I think there's also a little more to that story, but I don't know.
I think that's a secret, Jeff.
Okay, cool. Never mind.
I don't know. I mean, I think there is too, but are you guys going to try and, put this book into stores? Because it seems that they're shifting to try and actually get Bad Idea books into stores instead of their old model, which kept people from obtaining this stuff.
I'm excited to hear your interview with him. Dinesh is like super savvy, super cool, and very nice. I really, really like Dinesh. That said, we had done everything to kind of jump through the hoops to be a part of the first 2 waves of Bad Idea comics.
Yeah.
And with the kind of unique guidelines that there were for those, I don't think we ever felt like we made money off of them, especially like the locked in order amounts meant we ended up having a lot of extra stuff. There was a double order at some point. Like
it's all goofy.
It was all goofy and made it difficult to quantify whether or not it was a successful business venture for us as retailers. That said, I think that's kind of what they were going for.
Sure.
So I am excited to watch how this evolves. I think I did order a handful of those, but until they get some different creative teams on the books to make it not necessarily like Bad Idea. The felt a lot like just an extension of Valiant to me because there's a ton of the similar creators. So I'm going to take a wait and see approach now.
Okay. Aaron, anything on that or no?
We haven't seen a ton of interest when the Bad Idea stuff first launched. You'd get a lot of folks in just because of the novelty of it, and I think there was only at that time one shop south of LA that was carrying any Bad Idea stuff, and we had looked into the guidelines to start carrying it, and it was just like entirely prohibitive, and had spoken with some of them during Comic-Con at one point, and their pitch of it being like, I come from like a very punk rock DIY background, and so the thing that sold me was they were pitching it as like, this is like a band, only pressing 500 copies of a 7-inch that's only available in their in their local region, like it's only sold at local shops. And it's like, I get that. But the creators, like someone like Jeff Lemire has a large enough reach where people are like, oh, cool, I want this book. Oh, I can't get it? That stinks. Oh, when's it going to be out in trade? Oh, it's not coming out in trade? Oh, that stinks. So I'm hopeful that the new direction kind of like opens up the possibility, not just for like smarter distribution, but I think having that stuff available long-term so that people can actually read these books. Like I'm all for people reading comic books. I would love to order comics that people can read, not stuff that's just going to get stashed away as like some rainy day investment because they only sold them to 100 comic shops.
That's been one of my biggest frustrations with Bad Ideas, that like we don't have a lot of extra time. So it was a hassle for us to get them in the store. We did it. That's cool. But every time I read it, I was like, this is an amazing comic, and also a pain in the ass to get in for people.
It also, like, I think the speculator market is an important part of the comic market. And as comic stores, like
for business,
it's easy to get burnt out by those folks, and there's room for them to be kind of irritating in the way they go about things. But I respect it and think that it's a necessary part of the ecosystem of comics. That said,
for good or bad, it's part of it. It's part of it.
And Bad Idea, being a person that was selling Bad Idea, it put us on the radar of more people who maybe that's kind of their emphasis. And so it'd be people from out of town or people that don't necessarily value the community of our store quite as much. And so it meant we were dealing with customer interactions that weren't necessarily the ones that we're always trying to foster as much. I mean, again, I think it's a part of it, and I want to serve those people as well. But ideally, I'm like, kind of like Aaron said, I'm getting comics people who want to read them, who will come back and get turned on to other stuff and kind of be a part of the community of our comic shop.
I would love to hear from you guys about the breakdown of those kinds of like sub communities. Like, do you have a sense for what percentage of your community is readers? What percentage is collectors? What percentage is speculators? Is that something that you guys have tried to quantify, or do you have like a quick gut check on like how that breaks down?
That's an awesome question. I hadn't thought of it.
It's a great question.
I've got a quick gut check, but I'm curious what Django's thinking.
I don't like we at some point in our point of sale, we started tracking how much people care about condition. We didn't get that information from every single person, but we could probably find a report that would tell us how many people care about condition, which would indicate some of this. We work really hard to sort of push people towards following creators over characters, and value the story and the storytelling over just having the next issue of a thing. So I would guess that in store, we have a huge number of readers versus speculators or collectors. But we also have a handful of speculators and collectors that, we've found ways to get them exactly what they need as well.
Sure.
I would say by just a gut check, it's probably like 90-10 in favor of readers in our store. In the point of sale system that we've built, we've made it so when people have an account and they buy something, it'll throw a little exclamation mark up if somebody's trying to buy something that they already bought.
Smart.
And yeah, so like we probably kind of discourage that a little bit. But that said, like, we have somebody who gets things graded for reselling, who checks our FOC every Friday when it goes up and places pre-orders ahead of time for all that stuff. Like, he's the person who I learned about Mark Spears from. So like, in that regard, he's playing by the rules every step of the way and is making it easy on us. And
Perfect.
for that, I think it's awesome. Like,
And he hasn't gone bankrupt yet.
exactly.
Somehow.
You know, like, I mean, I am anti-speculator for like the core of me. I hate that shit because it ruined comics in the 90s.
Yeah.
It really,
Morally,
it did.
I'm with you. Yeah.
Yeah. I when I talk speculating, I'm not talking about buying, you know, first appearance of Galactus because the movie's coming out, because that's more that supersedes speculating. It's
Right.
the modern shit, and
Yeah.
you know, like that whole game, you know, whatnot,
It's
and all
the
that.
flipping.
Yeah, it's the flipping, you know, but it's the oh, you got to get, you know, like, remember when that Black Panther book came out and they had that new character Tosin, and everybody went absolutely ape shit. Their grandmas went ape shit. I'm like, you're really like you're not going to learn the lesson from 1990.
I got this Death as Superman, I want to say.
So I think that's really interesting because in some way, shape, or form, like, on some level, that's what we're all doing. Like, we are all buying a comic for one price and then selling it for a higher price.
Of course.
But I think all the time at the beginning of COVID, Joe from Flying Colors Comics had posted about how comic shop owners are mercenaries, but we're also missionaries.
Yes.
And it's that balance. We'll try to do stuff, you know, like one per customer on something like that, the DC Sonic crossover.
Yeah.
Just to discourage people from coming in and buying the whole stack.
Yeah.
And so I'm always curious to see like how shops are kind of perceiving, like, you know, the healthiest shops feel like the ones where reading is the top priority. Like, we carry a lot of back issues, and I love back issues.
Oh, yeah.
Dave, I know like you are like a diehard back issue guy, but like, I want people to read those books, and it feels like the people who are reading those books are more likely to keep coming in and reading them.
Yeah.
But it's also like, it's very self-selective. Like, we don't carry a lot of graded stuff, partially because I'm not interested in graded stuff, and partly because it's a market that is not as reader focused. And so those tend to be less consistent members of the community. So I'm always curious to see like how shops are kind of like throttling those dials and levers in the shop.
It sounds like our shops are pretty similar from that perspective.
Yeah.
There's a reason why I love both of you guys.
You know,
I mean,
well, I was just going to say, thinking about the strength of the industry right now, something that just popped into my head that I think is really interesting is, you know, between a change in point of sale systems towards emphasizing a customer facing, you know, module of things, Managed Comics does that. Then you've got things like League of Comic Geeks. We're seeing this increase in technology, allowing people to have a way more specific touch to get the things that they want to get, which seems like related to seeing a strong health of the comic industry, because people have more of an ownership or control over getting different things. And I think we're in like a unique period of the last like 5 years where that has become way more of an emphasis for people, like wanting to have a customer facing side, which didn't really exist before not long ago.
No, it didn't.
Yeah.
I pride myself on that too, you know, knowing what people want and catering to that. I did want to just mention one thing, back to the bad idea thing. My buddy John Wayshak has a book coming out with them some point this year called Cul-de-sac, and holy fuck, it's going to blow everybody's minds.
Nice.
But
is he a writer or an artist?
He's an artist. He's an artist.
Cool.
Awesome. Yeah. So, and he colored the whole book too. So he's the real deal on that.
It's a good name. It's a scary word, even though it shouldn't be.
Yeah, I know. So yeah, with the speculator stuff, like, it's understandable. I get it. Some people are going to always want to collect. They don't have an interest. I'm always try to encourage, and I know you, all three of you, and pretty much every store that I'm friendly with, everybody tries to encourage to interact with the piece of art that you just bought. It's not just a dollar sign. Sure, I'm not going to sit and read an Amazing Fantasy 15. There's plenty of there's plenty of great either black and white or color facsimiles of that for me to read. But I'm also gonna read the expensive first appearance of the Crow that I have, because I'm never gonna be able to read it any
Yeah.
other way. So in that, like, what's like in the back issue business, and you guys both have your selections. How has that been? Let's just say like the last year, but have you seen a rise in people going back to it to find stuff like, well, if you can, Invincible, some of the Daredevil stuff, like the single issues, or with the FF movie coming out, have you seen people trying to get the burn run, or like pick up the books that they can, or is it just kind of like it's always the same kind of steady business as back issues?
We can't price up enough copies of Invincible right now. We
It's
bought a
not possible.
collection recently, and I went through one night, watched some bad TV, and priced them up and put them out, and they started selling instantly. And I was blown away at how high the prices were on them as I went through. There's like a couple of $8 issues, but everything else is 15 and up. And they sold fast enough that I just dug through my own collection and put those out a week later, and we've already sold a third of those. So I think people are following that kind of media trail right now. Dr. Doom, people the last year they've been going for Doom appearances that we might see in the Marvel movies, and lots of that those kinds of things popping, which is awesome, and also just means that if whatever doesn't sell, we're going to have to reprice in 6 months, which is like the eternal cycle of the comic store.
That's great to hear, though. Aaron?
Back issues have been pretty consistent for us. Moving in a slightly different direction. Like 2 years ago, even, were much more likely to sell big ticket books, either like big first appearances, big Silver Age keys. I could do like a first appearance Friday post of 10 books going into the showcase and could sell 5 of them before the end of the day. And now it's a lot smaller. Like we're selling more $5, $10 books. We just did like a big sale on our $2 bins, where we were every week of March dropping the price until they were 25 cents each, just to try to move out inventory. And people would come in and they would spend $200, but fill up 2 long boxes. So we're seeing the same dollar amount come in year over year, month over month, but it's moving away from $500 and up keys to now smaller, like $50 and $100 keys are the stuff that now, if we put those in the showcase, those will move real brisk.
Okay, that's good to know. So let's get to the portion that I know a lot of people are going to want to hear about, because it's the fucking hottest topics. And it's the least interesting to me because it's so out of everybody's control, and there's everybody's got a different opinion. And it's 2 things:
release dates,
the distribution shakeup, and what's still happening.
Is something happening with distribution?
With Diamond. So I'll get to the other thing after, because they're 2 separate things. But with Diamond, what's interesting is you hear 2 schools of thought. Good riddance, because they have proverbially fucked comics for a long time, and other people saying no, they've done so much good for the independent distribution. So, and it's still unsettled. There was the auction and all that stuff and a lawsuit, but what's your separate opinions? Like, what do you guys each think of? What would you like to see distribution be like going forward, and the pitfalls of it, and what's happened?
Django and I are, I think on the same page in terms of our opinions about Diamond, which is, sure, there has been some abusive practices because they had a monopoly, and that you would come to expect. But I think Django and I both have a pretty high appreciation for what they did and accomplished, and what they kind of helped the industry through, in spite of maybe making some of it worse. So like I want the best for them. I want them to be open and a distributor that I continue to choose to not order from, rather than remove the option to be able to order from. But yeah, I think that providing people with options is always a great thing. So Penguin, Lunar, and Diamond are great. And our Diamond orders are very, very small at this point. But I wouldn't, I have a debt of gratitude to them, and I think the whole industry does. So I don't want them to feel like it was a whole loss,
Well, they also were kind of like this invisible force underneath everything for so long. Like a lot of the point of sale systems, a lot of the routines that comic stores have come to be able to do and come to rely on are because of things that Diamond did and didn't make noise about.
Like Previews Magazine.
Like Previews Magazine.
Free Comic Book Day.
Yeah.
Free Comic Book Day, like series
just their
codes.
Data. Yeah.
Just like supplying images for every single comic that comes out. Like with distribution fracturing, if Diamond were to totally go away, we wouldn't have an easy way to get so much information that we rely on. So it's sad to see them go through this, and I hope that whoever takes over, whatever business model they choose, isn't too destructive.
Yeah, there's so much value in Diamond, and we're obviously not monsters. Like, don't want to see anyone lose their jobs. Like, don't want to see warehouses shut down. And Jeff, I think your point about more options is definitely the way to go for retailers and for consumers. My big fear was that Diamond going away would create fewer options for everybody in the ecosystem, and for those smaller publishers, especially. Like, Marvel's going to be fine no matter what, and DC's going to be fine no matter what. But it's the outside of the top 10 publishers, it's those 500 other micro press that are going to have a real hard time either getting a foot in the door at Lunar or at PRH, who may not want to take on 500 times the effort for 1% of the overall profits. So I think Diamond sticking around is necessary. That said, like they've absolutely, they are reaping what they've been sowing for 5 years. In the 6 years that we've been open, 300 plus weeks of New Comic Book Day, we have not one single time in 300 plus weeks gotten everything that we ordered in saleable condition. And so when PRH and Lunar step up and they're shipping stuff faster and in better condition, and we're getting better rates from them, and their customer support is more responsive, it's hard to be, entirely sympathetic. Like Diamond's just for so long been the only game in town that they didn't have to be any better. And now there are significantly stronger options that are showing that there's better ways to do it.
And also Diamond, like they have a way to fairly accurately distribute Dynamite's covers. Right. So like, that's something that Lunar, I don't think wants to do. I don't want to speak for them, but I think a cover program like what Dynamite has is a hard sell to a distributor unless they're specifically made to handle that bulk of confusing cover action.
50 plus SKUs for every issue is
so like Diamond wasn't 100%, but if you look at the confusing nature of what they were distributing, they did pretty good for a really long time.
Pretty good.
Do you guys know the book Comic Shop by Dan Garino? There's a longer like Comic Shop, the Mavericks that shaped the industry, something like that. It came out in 2016. I just read it this past weekend. A customer got it for me at WonderCon. And it's all about the history of the direct market and kind of the formation of the comic shop as an idea. And it's absolutely fascinating looking at, how even in 2016, so much of the book is, the Geppies have saved comic books and they've ironed out this whole, mess in comics distribution, and it's not regional anymore. It's not territorial, and Diamond is the way to go. And I'm thinking like, things have changed so much in such a short period of time.
When you think about it, wrestling and comics have a lot in common with the territories, the business behind it, the people that ran it.
Totally.
Look, I will never say that comics is a terrible business behind the curtain, but so much of it fucking is, like, from the top down, like not the comic shops, but like the systems that were built in place, whether it's Marvel not paying people and ripping them off and stealing their artwork or whatever, and writers using their power to do awful things when it comes to the other gender, or the distribution wars and all that. And I agree, monopolies are bad, and the business behind it definitely needs to change. And obviously, you know, it's a greater piece of symbolism. The big things have to fall for them to change.
Well, and they are changing. Like,
Yeah.
no matter what happens with Diamond, if that hadn't happened, we wouldn't have started working on the Comet standard to like normalize and standardize data that goes out to all the comic stores that are using point of sale systems. And we wouldn't have, there's been a whole lot of innovation because of the shakeup, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, clearly somebody can ship a complete order on time, in fact 4 days earlier than Diamond could before. And there are like logistical reasons that's easier for somebody who's only shipping a tenth of what Diamond had to ship. But when it all comes down, like, it doesn't matter whether Diamond survives or not, because we're going to be ahead of the game in so many other ways. And I for the record, I hope they survive.
Sure.
I like everything you guys were saying, the options
options
and the people.
Yeah.
It's interesting. The number of people being like, oh my God, like, are you going to be okay with the Diamond news? And it's just like, okay, like, that is a big headline, but it's interesting people would know that, but not know that, like, there are other distributors handling almost all of the same stuff right now. And we don't really, unfortunately, because we'd scaled Diamond back quite a while ago, like, it's almost like no change to our business outside of the data that we're getting.
That's something that I've been incredibly thankful for. We at the very beginning of COVID, because of late shipments and changing distribution, then we started hammering really, really hard on making it clear to folks, this isn't our fault. Like, we want to have these comics, but books are coming late from Diamond, or we didn't get this shipment from here. And so we really tried to educate our community about the distribution channels and where stuff was coming from. We got everything from Lunar and PRH this week, but we didn't get our Diamond stuff. And so it feels like, we've kind of had this several years of groundwork where we've been putting in the work, educating folks. So now it feels like, oh, Diamond stuff, it's going to be a headache, right? But you're fine. Okay, great. So it's not, I think 5 years ago would have been Chicken Little, like, it's the end of the industry.
Right. Oh, I remember when I first started following you on Instagram, and I'm like, every week was it a different heartbreaking like post. You're like, well, we got this and this and this, but this isn't here, and that educates me, because, like, to know that it's happening, because the thing about comic book stores, as you all know, and everybody that has ever been into a comic store, no two comic stores are the same. No two comic stores do things the same way. You are a network of independent businesses, and you are beholden to these companies, good and bad, in good and bad ways. And so it's almost, I mean, record stores may be the only thing that is a commonality around this country and around the world, that are beholden to multiple companies. Whereas, like, bookstores, there's several really big publishers. Barnes and Noble is not calling up, Jim Maffood and saying, hey, let's support your Kickstarter and get your books in there.
Right.
They're, going to the publishers. Now, before we get into the indie stuff that I did want to talk about, the other hot topic, not the store, but the other hot topic issue, tariffs. This entire fuck show of what's been going on is finally affecting comics, or is it? Because we're hearing different stories. Obviously, one of the biggest pieces of news to come out is Todd McFarlane decided to raise the cover price to $3.99 after $3.99 20 years of $2.99 or whatever, which is completely understandable. That man held out as long as he could. Yeah, we can give him his time.
I'll allow it.
Totally. And a lot of those covers are like cardstock covers, which generally increases the price $1 anyway. Yeah.
Brief detour, but only to make you happy, Dave. We had done a taste test with customers a while ago, where we laid out 5 books from 5 different publishers and had them just like by feel judge which was like the highest quality book, and spawn like head and shoulders, like consistently, like everyone that we asked, they were like, this is the best book. And it's like, and it's the cheapest one. Like, how is Marvel charging $6 for this book that feels like it's going to fall apart in your hands?
And the other thing, like even behind the curtain on that, is it's a guy who's not beholden to another publisher, and so he can pay people to work on these books, and he doesn't have to ever be like, oh, you don't get a piece of this, you know, you don't get a decent amount or whatever. But yeah, it's. I mean, are you seeing any effects? We hear that it's not affecting paper. It is. I know. Obviously, when it comes to bags and boards, a lot of them are not made here. Is there anything that you've seen, or have you really not been affected yet? Or are you waiting for the shoe to drop?
It's so early. Like
Yeah.
it's so far too soon to tell, I think. Our tactic, I don't think Jeff and I have just sat down and talked about this, but I'm guessing that our tactic with this will be similar to our tactic with COVID lockdowns, where instead of trying to chase the update of the day, we'll just pick something a little bit cautious and stick with it until we see that there's a new paradigm. And that's sort of, you know, we could get twisted up and freaked out and try to react with every new shred of news.
Sure.
But this feels a lot like that time period when, you know, oh, you can have 5 people in your store. Oh, you can have 6 people in your store. Or you can have 30 people in your store, but they all have to be wearing gloves, or, you know, like whatever it was. We're just like, all right, nobody come in the store for right now, and later on we'll let you come in the store.
Like, there you go.
Interesting, you know, for a medium that is so built on like nostalgia and routine and familiarity and kind of legacies. I think the comic stores that have proven an amount of like flexibility and, you know, ability to change the plan at a moment's notice. You know, it's interesting how many stores are adopting that by necessity. And that's where, you know, I think we feel safe in that. Fortunately, we've been able to adapt to whatever is happening in a moment's notice for several years now. Aaron, sounds like you have as well. So we are taking kind of a wait and see approach, because it'd be very easy to get, you know, caught up in the Chicken Little of it all. But we'll, you know, also with this particular people in power and decision making, like I can't really trust anything's being said until I'm being given direct evidence of what to happen and wait a
Sure.
minute.
Invoice.
So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, your invoice changes. That's when you
The only material change I've seen in the short term has been from BCW, who's our supplier for most card supplies and bags and boards and boxes. They had sent out an email about a week ago that prices were going to increase because of the tariffs. And they're always cagey, right? Like they don't say how much things are going up or what they're going up. And so we just comped our last invoice against the prices currently listed on the site. And I think it's like a 2 or 3% change in most cases.
Nominal.
So I don't know how much of that is them, you know, being overly cautious. Like, have they not raised things to the max extent yet? I had somebody speculate that they had really shot for the moon during COVID when they had to raise their prices. And so they've just not really adjusted them down since then. So they've got a little bit more buffer. Who knows if that's the case, but that's the only immediate change that I've seen on the tariff front. Like it's something that we're trying to educate our community about. And so we're still taking the same wait and see approach. And, you know, you drive yourself bananas trying to figure out the 58 branching possibilities of what might happen. But yeah, we've been talking through it with folks, and the community's definitely concerned. Like it's maybe more so than Diamond, a thing that's like very much on the forefront of people's minds, and not knowing where comics are printed and where their books are coming from. They just know that tariffs are going to happen, is what they're hearing. And so they're looking to see how that's going to affect their weekly comic habit.
For better or worse, our store runs really deep in a variety of product lines. And so if single issue comics go up to $8 or $9 each or something crazy, we've got a ton of back issues and trade paperbacks we can sell you. If trade paperbacks go way up, then we've got a bunch of back issues and old trade paperbacks that we can sell you. Like we, you know, no matter what, things are going to change, but we run pretty deep on inventory. I mean, you've been in our labyrinthian back room and upstairs and warehouse and dungeon, and
I love it.
You're welcome anytime.
Come on
Dave.
up.
And that to Jeff's point about flexibility, like being able to kind of roll with the punches, like that's proven to be so valuable for us. Again, at the beginning of COVID, like the shops that closed in San Diego County were the shops that were least resistant or most resistant to change, least flexible. It's the old timers that didn't have an eBay store that they could lean on. It's shops that didn't do graphic novels. So when new books stopped, they had no way to get books to people. They had no customer base. And
you got to pivot.
We've gone out of our way as well to kind of diversify the portfolio, so to speak, like make sure that we've got enough vintage stuff. And then if vintage stuff cools down because people aren't spending on back issues, well, we've got enough toys that we can lean on. And toys are going up because of tariffs. Well, we've got these other things, like trying to roll with the punches. Like that variety, I think is absolutely a hallmark of a prepared shop.
Yeah. It's one of the things that I've talked to about my friends when it comes to this is that because I don't sell new things, if new things start to become more expensive, then you're right. Anybody that has a warehouse of vintage will end up being fine until, because people aren't going to be like, oh, I'm going to buy the new ASM book for $10 cover price when I can get, McFarlane's and 16 issues for $25 or whatever. And I think Aaron, you said something about the toys. I think that's where people are going to start to see a change if it really goes through. Maybe it'll hit Funko Pops first and we'll all rejoice. Funko Pops will just go away. I know you might sell a couple here and there, but fuck those things.
Yeah.
We probably get 10 times more calls now about people selling Funko Pop collections than we do from potential buyers.
That's the only place our inventory comes from at this point.
Who could have seen that coming? And I one portion of it, just with everything's been going on without getting super, super political, but you guys both own stores that are border stores. San Diego is very close to Mexico and you guys are as close to Canada. You can spit there, which you wouldn't because we love Canada.
We like those guys.
Sure do. Yeah, we like them more than a lot of our country.
Yeah. Have either of you seen just any noticeable decline on people from out of the country coming to the store?
We don't track people's nationality.
Fair enough. That's
nice. I would say that our city has seen it, and we probably have. We're like the farthest north Costco and the farthest north Trader Joe's, and you can park at both of those places now, and you have been able to for a while.
That's what Joe told me.
I think somebody said that sales in Costco were down 35% since all this stuff started popping off. So I'm sure that we're experiencing that as well. And our growth from moving to a new location and having the toy store and stuff like that has offset the shrink that we should have probably seen.
Mm-hmm.
We've not had any significant change in traffic. We're the only shop in downtown San Diego. So we're closest to the hotels, we're closest to the airports, and we're closest to the convention center, not just for Comic-Con, but for any of their conventions. And so I would guesstimate probably 20-25% of our overall foot traffic is from tourists. Whether that's from out of state or out of country. But we can definitely tell when things start to get a little slack, when we start hitting spring break is really when things definitely start to ramp up. You start seeing a lot of unfamiliar faces in the shop. You start seeing a lot of people wearing badges from the nearby convention centers. So when that stuff cools down, we absolutely feel it. So it's not something that we've seen yet, but it's absolutely something that's top of mind. If it does come to that, we get a lot of folks who come up from south of the border that drive up from TJ, and they'll get their comics from us. Or when we were doing that big back issue sale, a lot of folks came up and would buy comics from us for 25 cents so that they could go back south and sell them for $1 or $2 and still make decent money. So it would absolutely be something that's detrimental if we do start seeing a slowdown in tourism wherever it's coming from.
Yeah. I've often. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I've often thought about becoming a comic mule. I mean, serious, like first serious, like I have heard from friends in Australia, obviously it'd be a little bit tougher, but I've heard from friends in Australia, like your general back issue here, like let's stick with John Byrne, Fantastic Four, would sell for like 3 times there what it would here. And I'm like, well, I could drive up to Canada and bring like long boxes if somebody needs,
Yeah.
you know, down to Tijuana, although I may not come back, but you know. We will get right back to it. I just want to let you know I have a podcast in additional to this called Direct Edition. It is a podcast about nothing and everything, my place to interview artists of all sorts, musicians, actors, directors, comic book professionals. So check that out. You can find its own YouTube channel, Direct Edition Podcast. The link's down below. Or visit www.directeditionpodcast.com and find your favorite streaming platform and subscribe to it there. Now back to the video.
One thing that kind of fits in with everything we've been talking about, and so Jeff and I are on a podcast called The Data Bros with Brian Garside from Manage Comics, and we did an episode that was about sort of the pros and cons of the loyalty of comic customers to their stores, and how that sort of gives comic stores and publishers a hard time sort of telling when something's wrong, right? So somebody's going to buy Amazing Spider-Man even if they hate it until they quit reading comics forever all of a sudden, and that could be 3 years into them getting fed up, right?
Yeah.
So and I think that is, you know, I don't know exactly how to tie that into tariffs and pivoting and all of that, but there's something in there where you kind of have to be this Karnak who can see the cracks in everything and figure out where things are going to fall apart without really great feedback. And I think successful comic stores have to have an amount of that sort of built in. So that episode is one of my favorite episodes that we've done. It's on our feed. I just looked it up. It's called Loyalty Appreciation in the Top 5 Most Pulled of 2023.
I'll get that link in the description for you.
Yeah.
You send me the link and I'll put it down there.
Awesome.
It's interesting that you guys had mentioned at the top of the show, like the head and the heart response from the two of you. Like, I think that's such a great way to frame it. Like, so much of what we're doing is not just like entirely data and analytics driven. Like that is absolutely a huge part of it. But so much of it is also like, oh yeah, but I really like this artist. Like I really believe in this book. And I want to, like, sometimes you have to will those things into existence. Like you've got to hand sell like crazy to convince people, like, no, like read, like, you trust me. I know Murder Falcon sounds ridiculous. Like on its face,
it'll make you cry.
read this book. You will love it. Like it's so interesting that so much is the balance of those two.
I mean, sorry, Dave. Please.
No, Jeff.
Well, I was just gonna say, yeah. I mean, it's specific to this medium. We're trying to track like differences in buying habits for the tariffs and what could happen with that. Kind of like Django was just saying, like people will stick with these things even if they're not liking them. Like the previous Amazing Spider-Man run, where just like the internet community hated it, but like everyone was still buying it. I think tariffs will have a similar effect, which is so many people who are buying comics are doing it for reasons aside from the quality of the specific item they're holding in their hand. Like it reminds them of their dad, or like going to get comics as a kid, or they've been reading Spider-Man forever. Like there's these things
targeting me.
Yeah, always. So there's these things that make a financial decision a little bit less black and white of whether they're not going to do it, because it's a thing where your identity gets really tied into the habit of it.
Yeah. I did want to, you made me think of something. I just want to, Aaron, give a shout out to Zach. One of those people that like will scream from the mountaintop about a book that he loves. He's one of your employees. And, that's why I like, your stores and the vibe that you all put out. It's about propping up the medium. And with what you were saying, Jeff, and it makes me think, I do inherently these days have a very big problem with Marvel. Not so much DC, because DC is really pushing great stories out there, where Marvel seems to like push a couple and then like let them die or and they don't do the right thing. Like they are not putting comics into places where they should be. There should be comics in movie theaters and et cetera, et cetera. But where do you as shop owners kind of like find yourself on the line of like pushing stuff that you love without saying like, oh yeah, this company, these big two are kind of putting out too much shit. You know it. We all know it. But you also can't damage your business. But at the same time, these two overlords allow, like they can make or break the entire industry, and they seem to not be working to make it.
I think you just focus on the good stuff. Like,
Yeah.
you should buy this amazing issue of Absolute Martian Manhunter. Like, we pushed that so hard.
Yeah.
And issue 2's not out, so I don't know how successful our push was, but it's a great comic. And if there's something that's coming out that I'm not into, I'm not going to push it as hard.
Yeah.
We've been running comic shops for quite a while, Aaron, you included. Newish customers, people in their first year of kind of becoming regulars at your store, there's kind of a couple typical buying habits that happen. And one of them, as I'm interpreting you, like particularly what I feel like Marvel will do is kind of this thing where it's like a really good X-Men book comes out and then they put out 15 other X-Men books, which is kind of an abusive practice to your consumers, who are people who want to be able to take in all of it. So a thing that I have always not pushed, but recommended as I'm starting to see some of that behavior in people is just be like, be careful you don't burn out. Like, if any of these are not fun or you're not enjoying them, let us know and we'll stop getting them in for you, and make that avenue as clear as possible. Because before I worked at the shop, if I was getting books I didn't want, I would sheepishly walk around and put them back on the stands or something, which is bad for the store. But like, people, they want to be in love with the things, but making it clear to them that, like, yeah, you can always stop getting things, because it might be advantageous to be selling 6 extra books to this person for 3 or 4 weeks, but they're gonna burn out sooner than somebody who finds a healthy buying rate for that. So helping empower people to be willing to say no to things that aren't exactly what they're looking for, right, is a big thing that I try to do and we look for.
That's much healthier long-term thinking. The first comic shop that I had worked at was absolutely awful, like typical like Simpsons comic shop guy. Like would tell the little old lady bringing in the Golden Age collection, like, I'll give you cover price 10 cents a piece for all these books, and then close the shop early and ride his motorcycle all around town, like just a real dirtbag. But like, learned very early on, like, you can squeeze someone for $100 today and you'll never see them again.
Yeah.
Or you can get them for $5 a week every week for the next 20 years.
Right.
And I'm in it for the long term. Like, I want people to stick around. I want people to stick with the shop. I want people to stick with the comics they like.
Yeah.
So I would much rather have people walk out happy. And sometimes that's steering people away from books that are, less than high quality right now. Every once in a while, like there's some diplomatic responses, like something like Court of Owls, I don't care for. Yeah. I recognize that I am in the minority, but it's a book that a lot of like casual readers or like people new to Batman will come in and they'll say, oh, I've heard this is really good. I've heard this is on the top 10 list. What do you think? And being able to tell people sincerely, it's not my favorite flavor of Batman, but it's incredibly popular.
But it's his favorite flavor of Batman.
Exactly. Like, this is a huge seller. This is absolutely like, oh, it inspired this, and this. Like, you can give people that answer. Like, you don't have to say this sucks. You don't have to be dismissive of it.
Sure.
Like, I want people to be happy, and maybe they'll be happy with Court of Owls. Like, it's not about what I'm interested in. It's finding out what they're looking for. And sometimes it is like that little bit of course correction. Like, oh, you're looking for this X-Men story? Well, maybe if I steer you towards Days of Future Past, or like maybe if you look at like House of Power, or like House of X and Powers of X, like maybe that's the good jumping on point for you rather than this other book. Mm-hmm. It's trying to find what's going to spark joy for them, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I have often thought in the past, and I think it may just be the Marvel movies, that I don't feel that Marvel movies create readers, but I will say in the last year or 2 years, Invincible clearly has. I've watched people walk into several different stores and be like, oh, you have Invincible comics, and the comic store owner has to explain, Well, I can't get you any of the single
Trying
issues.
so hard.
But here's the compendium, and Daredevil, I think Born Again is really turning people on to looking at Daredevil stuff, because Daredevil, I think it's really tough to deny the fact that it is the best written Marvel character over the course of the last 40 years consistently. But are you seeing any influences from other things come in? The first thing that my mind goes to is Marvel Rivals, which I'm addicted to it. I'm really good at it. And I'm clearly already a comic fan, so it's geared towards, this version of me. But are you seeing any younger kids come in, maybe they're late teens, early 20s, referencing that game and asking, do you have anything with these characters or whatever?
I've had a couple.
Yeah.
That I think that game has moved the needle. And I don't know that we could say that there's a direct line from the Marvel movies to specific purchases, but I think that what Marvel did with those movies is destigmatized comic books.
Sure.
And sort of, there was some bleed over into sales, but I think that it's on a larger scale. Like, I don't know that Invincible would have had a direct connection to comic stores if Marvel hadn't kind of set that stage for us.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. Like, the idea that, when I started reading comics, that you could go into a store and buy a Black Panther t-shirt, or that kids on a playground would know who Ant-Man was. Like, I'd tell you, you're out of your mind. Like,
instead of rubbing your face in the dirt.
Exactly.
As they should have.
Yeah.
But they have really made it, you're absolutely right. Like, part of that cultural lexicon now. We don't see as much movement from a younger audience. I think part of that's our location. Like, we're much more downtown. There's not as many families living in the immediate area. We do a lot of like tourism. Like, a lot of kids will look for all ages books. But where I've been most surprised that like Marvel Rivals or some of the games have had influence has been in specific artists. Like, the number of people asking for, like, oh, Dan Hipp. I've seen his cards in Marvel Snap. I want to get into Dan Hipp. I want to get into Momoko because I've seen their work through these other avenues. It's been interesting seeing specific creators rather than the characters blow up.
On the topic of like Marvel things that have seemed to like bloom out of strange spots, like Aaron, I would echo what you just said. But also, like, what is interesting to me is like the outcry for like cute things like Jeff the Land Shark or like Alligator Loki. And those are things that like our initial expectations for the numbers that we have, should order on them were like a quarter of what they should be. And so that's an interesting, like, like Guri Hiru and Kelly Thompson doing that stuff has we almost can't order enough of it. And that was something that I don't know where exactly it blossomed from, but they tested the waters with it, and it's been really successful that I wouldn't have expected.
I was going to say, I think across the board, we've seen more folks interested in fun. Like, a lot of the more recent DC stuff has been like not this kind of, shucks, gee whiz, wholesome stuff, but it feels like they're fun comics.
Yeah. And if you want shucks, gee whiz, wholesome, just grab Metamorpho.
I love Metamorph. It's such a fun book. There's so much fun stuff, I think, coming out from DC right now, and the Marvel stuff, Dave, to your point about Marvel kind of like falling slack in some of those areas. There's not as much stuff. We'll go through and we'll do previews recommendations once a month when the new previews drops. And we'll struggle to find a Marvel book that we're excited about, or we do year-end wrap-ups where, everybody on staff lists their 5 favorite graphic novels or titles, and I'll be the only one, like, out of pity, putting a Marvel book on my list because nobody else. Like, it's been a really dramatic shift, and I don't know how much of it is because the Marvel stuff isn't as fun. I don't know if it's they're not taking as many chances.
I think
it feels very vanilla from Marvel right now.
It may be to the point of, I forget if it was Django or Joe who said it, you need to be less into or maybe it was you, Aaron, don't focus on the characters, focus on the creators, because the creators are the ones that are going to either lead you astray or bring you in to great storytelling, where the characters will always lead you astray, because if you find you're a character collector, you're a character reader, and it's never going to reflect the thing you want. It's going to go some way or another that you don't want it to go.
Totally.
That Javier Rodriguez, I think that all of us have championed at some point during this talk, that a Martian Manhunter book could outsell, like, we will probably sell 3 times as many Absolute Martian Manhunters #1 as we do Amazing Spider-Man #1.
Yeah.
Which is cuckoo bananas. And for us, a lot of that success came from Zatanna bringing down the house last year. And Zatanna, again, is not an A-list character or even generously a B-list character.
Very
but
C.
we got so many people excited because we loved Rodriguez's art on the book so much. And people are absolutely responding to that creator touch, like something that feels passionate and individual, and it doesn't look and feel like everything else on the shelf.
Yeah. So speaking of creators, the L Boys are back. Jim Lee is back on Hush. Rob Liefeld is back on Youngblood, although I don't know if can somebody explain to me, are comic stores getting Youngblood #1, or is he just really selling that only on Whatnot? Which I've got so many. All right.
Good answer.
Kind of a blind spot for me, I got to be honest. Yeah.
Let's talk about Jim Lee Hush 2, because I'd love to hear what the impact was of this coming back. Regardless of what people thought about the first issue, the art's still the art. Did it have a big impact? That was a big week for comics.
That was such a big
week. Yeah.
When I stood in front of the new comics, we have a few customers who come in every Wednesday, and I'll stand there with them, or Jeff will stand there with them, and we'll be like, "Oh, you should check out this and this, and I think you wouldn't like that one." And I kept finding myself pushing 5 comics on these people. And then after I had stacked them up with Free for All and Martian Manhunter and they were like
2 and
no, Hush 2 was the one I was like, oh yeah, also Hush 2 came out.
I think Absolute Wonder Woman
6.
came out. Absolute Wonder Woman 5 came out that week. Or Absolute Wonder Woman 6.
It was just bonkers. And
it was we're taking everyone down with us, and you'll do bad.
You'll do bad things. And that was a weird week for us because we gave away almost 200 copies of that, sponsored by one of our customer friends, Will Elmer.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
So, like, to have Hush 2 be the #5 or #6 thing that I think to push on somebody who is absolutely going to like it. It was a weird week to do it.
Right.
And I'm super curious what the legs are going to be on the whole thing.
Yeah, we ordered a lot of it. And I think in the first week, it sold maybe a little bit less than I had thought it might. But the reason we ordered so much of it is a predicted very long tail for it. And so I'm 35, and I think kind of people within a couple years of my age, both directions, like, that's a very formative issue or a run. Batman Hushes. Yeah. So I think that, we kind of prepared to be able to, like, bundle runs of the first 6 issues with our order quantities. We would get it to people halfway through. I loved it. Like, but again, I am open about when I lose objectivity, and Hush, the first one, is kind of was responsible for getting me back into comics after having not read them for like 7 years when I was in high school. So I love it and holds a special place in my heart. But that said, we have a lot of them right now.
Did you guys sell out of your oversized issues?
We did. I mean,
both of them.
Yeah,
I still have one left, and it's killing me because
I didn't think it was going to be that big. Like, damn,
it's big. I mean,
damn.
I impulse bought it, but I was bummed that it wasn't just a line art. That would have been amazing if it was just the Williams on Lee.
Give me more of those.
Sure.
When they announced that they were going to be doing all of the issues in that scale because of the popularity, I was, oh no.
The drop off on the orders and the drop off on the print run of those is going to be epic.
Yeah.
I'm going to buy 7 of the 6th issue or the last issue because I'll be holding them.
We had to put them on the counter. They would not fit in any shelves in the shop.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That issue, like, from a creator standpoint or from a reader standpoint, like, I went in, I'm a huge Batman fan. Like, Batman's my guy. And I went in hoping to really love it. And I didn't really love it. Like, I thought it was pretty good. I thought it was it was like one of the lesser issues of the original Hush. You know, like it kind of some of the issues were amazing and rad, and some of them were like, oh yeah, we're getting to the next good issue here. And this one felt kind of like that for me from an art standpoint. Like there weren't splash pages that blew me away, and there weren't panels that blew me away. And it might just be because we're sort of spoiled with storytelling and paneling from Hayden Sherman and Rodriguez and like
Nick Dragata.
I was going to ask, do you think it would have felt cooler if we haven't already had 6 months of absolute Batman?
Probably.
It might have.
Yeah, I don't think it's Jim Lee's fault because his art is great. It just didn't punch me in the gut like it did before.
Yeah.
It looks great, but there is a different feel to like kind of modern Jim Lee art than to like when he first came over to DC. Like I love Jim Lee, but I don't know if it's the inking or the coloring or something.
Coloring.
Yeah. And I was just like, there's just something missing here.
Yeah. I think we ended up ordering 10 times as many copies as we normally do for Batman.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got about, I think 80% sell through right now for that first issue for Hush. But I'm real anxious about the next 2 issues because I don't think we sold one copy to anybody. I think it was all people buying a glow in the dark cover and a foil cover, and they want the oversized one. And so we had ordered heavy, anticipating not a long tail like you had mentioned, Jeff, but specifically either speculators or variant buyers, like people that wanted all of their favorite artists covers, and with a real like murderer's row of cover artists for that, you're spoiled for choice.
Although murderer row of cover artists, but for you, Aaron, I don't know what your check-in process that Tuesday was like, but man, that was the most difficult time separating issues from a box versus an invoice, because you're like, oh, the Jim Lee cover, the wraparound cover that's the same image but part of a wraparound, then there was the foil that was also that same image. Like it was the most poorly separated collection of covers. It took me like 20 minutes.
You guys remember what it was like to just have one cover for a book? Oh wait, Hush.
Not as a retailer.
Hush. The Hush run, the original Hush run, aside from the last issue.
Yeah, that's something I'd like to hear from you guys about. Do you have a sense for how your variant ordering has changed at all in the recent past? I know for us, we had seen individual issue sales had gone up quite a bit for us at the tail end of last year. And a lot of it was driven by variants, like selling more cardstock variants, or also books with larger cover prices. Dave, I know you've mentioned the distillery stuff, like all of those hitting like $7.99, $8.99. We're selling more variants than we have in the past. And I'm not a variant guy, and I try really, really hard to pare down what we're ordering. I'd rather have stuff sell out than sit on the shelf. But we've seen so much more interest in variants, like across the Absolute books and something like the new Hush.
Yeah, for us, similarly, I'm not a huge variant guy. I would kind of love to just get A covers for things. Sure. That said, I am a huge lover of artists and pieces of art. And the fact that a lot of these alternate cover books really do stand up as gorgeous pieces of art, makes it a way easier pill to swallow. But to your point specifically, basically just about a year ago now, starting with the Ultimate books and then definitely extending into the Absolute books, both of those, we have a lot more people buying multiple covers of a book, or like because of the hotness of the Ultimate books at the beginning, those ratio variants move quicker for us than a lot of them. We don't really generally even sell many 1 in 50 variants because people don't want to pay for them. But yeah, it is an interesting thing, between high profile books having alternate covers like Absolutes and Ultimates. So those are selling more. And then with DC specifically making it very easy to subscribe to like B covers that are always a pretty consistent art quality to them. So I would say that we are selling more of them at less work or less cost to us to have them. But as far as just casually ordering alternate cover books to have on the shelf because maybe they'll sell, we've cut back on that significantly.
Same.
Yeah, especially with it's disappointing as a consumer to see DC with these cardstock variants be on top of the regular A covers. Like I feel like I'm really being like it's really
weird.
a circus sideshow. Like I bought the Sienkiewicz Absolute Batman variant that came out last week, and I'm like, oh, that's right. It's just the regular cover under it. Like,
See,
Yeah.
we end up getting so many folks who are on the fence who are then sold on the fact like, oh, I can get the cardstock and it's got the A cover underneath. Two covers
Nice.
for the price of one. I love that.
Nice.
yeah, it just
I'm-
takes the specialty out of it
I
almost.
agree.
I understand.
I mean, from a printing perspective, it totally makes sense. But I mean, maybe we could just sell them all as double covers.
There you go.
Or we start popping the staples and sell the covers
Mhm.
separately.
Oh, there you
There it
go.
is.
Yeah, there we go.
Little posters. We're already selling little posters.
And before we'll do it for a little bit more, but I do want to ask, in short, can you guys each pick one thing that you would like to see change about comics? Whether it be large, whether it be simple, just something that would be a change that would help comic stores all together in the long run.
There is no one thing that all comic stores could agree on about that, Dave. There's
Yeah.
there's no way.
It was a hope and a dream.
As a personal lover of comic books, I would kind of emphasize what DC has been doing with their Absolute line, which is shining a light on creators that haven't been making comics nonstop for the last 8 years. Because like I like a lot of those things, but it seems like very often we're trying to recapture something with like a new release, or you remember this great book that this guy did? Well, now he's, on this. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, cool. Like those excite me as well. But like getting to see Hayden Sherman, who we've been talking about on our podcast for like 2 years, be on books. Like I want to see, the smaller publishers are getting those people in front of audiences, but the larger publishers taking a risk on those. And then I think the other big thing I would like to see is a larger commitment from publishers for a run to have legs at the beginning, because what I see is a change in the writing trends of comics when the writer doesn't know if their book is going to be 12 issues or 36 issues. So we talk a lot on our podcast about like kind of the 80s of comics where you'd have like the A plot, the B plot, and the C plot, and they're kind of moving up as you're dealing with. And writers don't have the time or confidence to establish things like that, because oftentimes the length of a series is going to be dictated within the first 4 or 6 issues based on sales. So I would love, longer runs being a thing that people are allowed to do, and the publishers would weather the storm of sales going up and down.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great thing to say.
That's the heart.
What do you got, Brain?
I would like more consistent release schedules and consistent weeks. We were at a DC thing a while ago talking to DC just about various, retailer stuff. And my question was, why are 5 weeks? Well, like, why do we still have 5th weeks?
Yeah.
Why can't we just publish a comic every 4 weeks? None of our customers would say, no, I think I'll skip the 13th comic this year. Right. and you guys can still put out annuals. We'll just double dip that week. Clearly things breathe and people have a larger or a smaller budget, but you shouldn't have to be like beholden to this once a month schedule when a once every 4 week schedule would do just as well and actually make us all a little more money, I think. And hopefully then we wouldn't end up with like what the week that Hush came out and the following week I had this many comics to read in 2 weeks. And then the next week I had like an inch of comics. And that I think better consistency there would help things.
We have a number of Ninja Turtle subscribers, and the frequency with which they complain about how they have nothing for 3 weeks, and then on the 4th week they have Turtles, they have Saturday Morning Cartoon Turtles, they have Mutant Nation Turtles, they have Night Watcher. Like all their books just land at the exact same time. And they're like, where was this for the last 4 weeks? I needed reading last week, not this week. I don't need everything all at once.
And Ghost Machine has been great about that, right?
Yes,
like trying to put out a comic a week instead of everything in 1 week after that first launch.
And I feel like the opposite is to be said about Distillery. White Boat still hasn't finished. I don't remember seeing another issue of that.
The McKelvey's book.
Yeah.
One for Sorrow. Was that it?
Yeah.
Like
Blood Brothers Mother.
People loved that first issue, and now here we are, like 6 months later, and we got nothing to sell.
And look, we can't account for the artists. Like, the artists have the hard job, honestly, you know, the art team. But I mean, you look at a guy like Zdarsky, and he's able to constantly get everything out on schedule, on time, and the guy's doing more books than pretty much anybody at any given time. You know, except maybe Scott Snyder.
Right.
So I would, you know, I would like to see, and it's never going to happen, but I'd like to see Marvel and DC scale back. More quality, less quantity.
You stole my answer, Dave.
Yeah.
And it seems antithetical, right? That like the thing that you want is fewer comics, but the amount of shelf space that is taken up by books that I know when I'm ordering them are not going to be good. And that we're not going to have an audience for them, but because it's an X spinoff or because it's the 17th Bat book this month, that we are obligated to have some copies of them on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're ordering 3 copies of a book, we have to sell 2 of them just to break even, and we have to sell all 3 of them to make like $3. Right. It's absolutely not worth the time and energy, but there's definitely an expectation that you would have at least the core Marvel and DC stuff. And this is we're now heading into, I think, the first quarter where we've not ordered everything that Marvel and DC are publishing. Like there's been a few minis that have popped up where I'm like, you know what? I'm going to pump the brakes. Like we've got no pre-orders for it. Nobody's talking about it. I can't find like a reason to be excited for the writer or artist or character.
It's probably the only way to ask them to pull back too, right?
Yeah.
Like you got to vote with your orders.
You do. You do. And with the pulling back, okay, what can they do? How about publishing some of the stuff that's been out of print for so long? People crave the thing about comics that I always say, and I know you guys will agree, we've got 100 years of them behind us.
Yeah.
There is so much to read that people have never read, never had the chance to read, don't know exist, you know? And so
with all the Daredevil excitement right now, it'd be nice to sell them all of the Bendis stuff. It'd be nice to sell them all the Frank Miller stuff. It'd be nice to sell them all the Mark Waid stuff. And that it's either $150 omnibus or it's not available at all is not an acceptable solution.
Yeah. And it's why I blame Marvel so much for so many problems, is because they have the biggest reach. They are a global sensation. Treat your comics like your movies, even 10%.
It's crazy because to that point, you know, like the Daredevil stuff, and you're like, okay, cool, we'll get this stuff back in print. But even when they get a new binding of it to start coming out in print, like the new nice collection of Ultimate Spider-Man we just had come out,
we
get volume 1 of that, and now it's several months till we're going to get the next one. It's like, you have it all.
It's
like,
done.
If you don't need to treat this like something that needs to be 4 or 5 months between volumes. Like, people will buy that specifically thing because they want to be reading Ultimate Spider-Man. If they're buying that volume 1, they're going to want volume 2 before 3 months from now.
And by the time volume 5 comes out, volume 1 will be out of print.
Exactly.
We'll be right back there.
The thing I always come back to with this stuff is these are retailer level problems and to some extent reader level problems, right?
Yeah.
I'm not a publisher. I've got no idea what the actual challenges are for them to get that stuff out to us, right? So they may be operating under the assumption that if they put the trades out too soon, it'll impact comic sales, which are then going to impact their ability to put out single issues. I don't think that's true, but they might have data that says that it is.
Right.
They might be 6 months out in just print queue from China or from Canada or whatever. Like, I think it's easy for us to say, well, you know what you should do to the publishers, just like it's easy for some idiot to come in off the street and say, you know what you should do to us, which is like the
Put your graphic novels in genre.
Yeah. Oh, we did, dipshit. So, like, yes, I agree. All that stuff would be nice. And I would love to hear from a publisher about what the resistance is for those things, because
I'd,
I'm sure there's
I'd love
friction we
to.
don't know about.
I'd love to see more communication in general. I've talked with a couple creators recently. We've got the Matt Rosenberg, Tyler Boss. Their road show is coming through our shop next week.
They're ending at ours.
Oh, awesome!
Yeah,
Perfect.
yeah.
You guys could pass
Brothers.
notes to each other.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we've been talking with creators a lot about how there's not as much opportunity for the conversation between these kind of like different pillars of like the comics community, that you've got fans and retailers and publishers and creators, and you don't get as much direct interaction between them.
Yeah.
And I think that some of the most successful creators you see are people that are most connected to their audience, like someone like Daniel Warren Johnson doing shows as frequently as he is. It's not just that he's an incredible talent and that he's putting out amazing work. It's that he's available and he's there and he's like, you can connect with him.
He's kind as all hell.
And Rosenberg and Boss as well, that they will like pound the pavement. Like anytime Rosenberg's got a new book, what can I do for shops? How can I record a video? Can I give you guys a shout out? More interaction between those silos would be beneficial for all of us to have answers to some of those questions, to have a better understanding. Again, from our perspective, communicating to our community about why books are delayed, like that information can only help. I'd love to see more of that interaction in all areas of the industry.
There's
it's almost like you're on a YouTube show to do that right now.
And God love you, Dave. God love you. You're doing the Lord's work.
Do you guys know Adam Freeman from Prana DM? He does the Industry Insider, the Comic Industry Insiders podcast. He has a panel that I haven't been able to see yet, but I think it's called From Script to Page, or From Script to Panel, something like that. And he's done it at a couple of different cons. I think he's doing one at C2E2 this week, but it just breaks down how a comic starts and every step of the way. Like, I don't know if they get as deep as paper choice, but it describes how a comic is made. And I think that, my time in a print shop, working at a bindery, as a graphic designer, as a small publisher when I was in high school, like I have a different perspective on some of the behind the scenes stuff than most people could ever have unless they'd experienced it. I would love to see just like, a super open discussion from every part of the industry. Like, oh yeah, it sucks when you guys ask for this, because I'm not allowed to say that it's that guy's fault. Right. But it's that guy's fault.
A lot of gatekeeping on that information.
I'm going to piggyback off your time in a print shop and suggest that every comic shop retailer should have to work for a publisher for 3 months. And everyone that works at a publisher should have to work in a comic shop for the same amount of time.
We're hiring right now, publishers. And send us your best.
And everybody that works at comics should have to also be a nerd, fan, reader, collector, and reseller to understand what people want. That's the thing that gets me the most, because like you guys know, all of you know that obviously the shirt I'm wearing, cartoonist kayfabe, like I come from a community of people that really care about everything about the whole animal. And I see things like treasuries being printed with glossy paper when Ed was able to get the grand design, the hip hop family tree, all that stuff printed on the correct paper. Yeah. And I see the DC treasuries are doing it the right way, and the Marvel doesn't know what the people want. We want tactility. We want this thing to look fucking shiny. Does not make it mean better.
Leave the bad colors, please. Leave the bad colors.
Yeah. And so when I'm popping down $40 and I'm getting something that looks like dog shit, why wouldn't I go back to the shop and be like, hey, do you have the original copy of this? I'll give you, and stuff like Artist Edition. Look at the craze that Mazzucchelli's Year One Artist Edition caused. Everybody and their mother wanted to buy that book, and they did. Yeah. And it's almost like the big two don't realize where the money truly is.
Yeah.
Like nobody's going to be upset spending $50 for something that's beautiful.
They found it with facsimiles, and then they milked it.
You milked it. Yeah.
They milked their whales effectively.
Mm.
Where do we stand on the ongoing Skybound Kickstarter for the
It just
Transformers box set?
they
Just
put out
ignore it.
everything and they just like people
But
are just flocking to it.
I think that's like a really really good, to your point, Dave, a really good example of there's an audience there, and maybe it's only 4,000 people, 3,000 people, whatever that number is. Maybe it's small enough that a major publisher wouldn't necessarily care what those 3,000 people are looking for. But that's 3,000 people looking to put down $400 each,
Yeah.
plus another 75 for shipping, and all of a sudden you're at $2 million like 2 days into your campaign.
Yeah.
That audience is there, and they've got the money.
I mean, it's small on a small note like that with the Extremity Kickstarter that Dan did. I
Yep.
mean, it was obviously it's not going to appeal to the Transformers size audience, but it's going to appeal to pieces of that.
Mhm.
And, that is something I wanted to ask. And I don't want to take too much more time with you guys, but Kickstarters and Indiegogo and, some of the other print on demand, are you guys ever doing some research to support or look at some of that stuff? Because honestly, the indie comics community has grown bigger than I think it's ever been. It seems more connected for sure. It definitely is more connected. But I have a lot of these people as on my shows. They're my friends, Jim Food and the guys at Cosmic Lion, and all these indie creators and publishers popping up. Are you looking at that actively to have some of that stuff in your store at any given time?
Totally. We backed the Extremity Kickstarter. We backed the GI Joe chunky book.
Yeah.
And then we
Um,
chickened out. I saw the shipping price and I was like, they can just have that $50.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But the way that our store has to go about it is by having a store Kickstarter and empowering our employees to go find the things that they want,
Yeah.
and then check back with us and do a Kickstarter, to choose to back it. Because where we are with multiple distribution is that our brains are pretty full of thinking about how we're getting the things.
Mhm.
And with Kickstarter, I haven't found a really curated, nice sort of list of the things coming out in a way. I love the Zdarsky comic news. I would love if comic creatives that are, of a certain caliber will be able to be getting in the Zdarsky comic news, and we do a roundup on those. Because I want to know those things, but the information comes out in not large enough channels that I can't really shine a light on it. But yeah, I love Kickstarter. What I would make sure is any comic creator that's doing one, set up a retailer tier, because not all of them do that.
Yeah.
And that's what we retailers need to be able to back those things, is some sort of retailer tier that allows us to get a chunk of them to stock in a quantity. And then, kind of streamlined pricing. But no, I think it's fantastic. And having our employees have access to that stuff, they're backing things that I've never heard of. And then, our rules are, as long as you make Facebook posts about it and kind of do a write-up next to it, you can do whatever you want. And that sells really well. So I'm a big fan of them.
That's
we've
that's
tried communicating that to campaigns as well, that the retailer tier, there's been some stuff that we've been really excited about, but without a retailer tier, it just doesn't make sense for us. And we're happy to signal boost, and we're happy to shine a spotlight on that stuff, but to get retailers to buy in, we did the Extremity Artist Edition as well, and it was because we had enough customers who were really, really excited about it, but then kind of moaning and groaning it's going to be $125 plus another $50 for shipping. It doesn't really make sense. And then once we looked at the retailer tier, it was like, oh, well, we could get 5 of these and make money and still sell it to you with your subscriber discount.
Yeah.
Everybody makes money. The campaign's successful, and we get a little bit of change, and the customer gets it for cheaper than they did if they backed it individually. That made perfect sense.
Axe Wielder John was another one we did. It was awesome. Maybe we maybe even sold one to you, Dave.
Oh, you did. You did.
Sweet. Yeah.
Well, and the Kickstarter thing is, I mean, we're seeing stuff that's unprecedented. If we were to tell ourselves 10 years ago, Matt Wagner and Kelly Jones are going to put out the best Dracula book on Kickstarter. Mike Allred was going to do a book of his art on Kickstarter. Daniel, like, and then finding all this stuff. And then with Mafu doing Savage Street Vigilante. And then Jim's got Arachnid Enforcer coming out this year. By the way, you can back that at the retailer level.
Nice.
I did for Savage Street because I figured,
Oh, I love him. Yeah.
It's a homie and my audience already likes him.
Terry Moore is another one who I'll always back just because I love him. And Abstract Studios is a small enough studio house that like it's the perfect thing for Terry Moore.
Mm-hmm. Kyle Starks, Old Head.
Oh yeah,
Old Head was one that he did. Like that's again, it's a creator that we're passionate about. It's a book that I know we can sell. My only caveat for Kickstarter stuff is like I'm so excited to see people excited about books.
Yeah.
And we'll get a lot of folks moaning and groaning about like Image doesn't need the money, or like Boom doing Berserker, like Boom doesn't need the money. Like that aside, like I'm all for anything that gets people reading and excited about comics, totally. But I'm glad that they're not leaving retailers completely in the cold, that they're, fulfilling stuff to retailers first. It's getting into shops before they're fulfilling those Kickstarter rewards.
Yeah.
It feels like a really great way for them to double dip without completely burning shops.
Totally. I mean, so I just did a little bit of math, and I'd never considered it from this perspective, but like a good Kickstarter is like 3,000 people or so. That's pretty solid, right? That's 60 people per state. That's not taking a significant bite out of any comic store.
No.
Sure.
Right? Especially with something the size of Transformers. 3,000 people is nothing. You could quadruple that, and they could have, it just doesn't make a difference in our ability to sell it. And I think, what I would like to see is that content, whether it's in the Kickstarter format or not, available quickly to us after the Kickstarter, whether it's before it's released or after it's released. Like I can let those 60 people, which is like probably one per store in the country.
Yeah.
We can let them slide, but we need to be able to sell Old Head. Right.
Well, and I think that's why Dark Horse did it the smart way with the Dracula book. I think it came out like a month after we got our hardcovers, and it was a trade. So it's like if you want the exclusivity of the hardcover, you got to get it here.
Yeah.
But then it's people double dip. I bought the trade and I ended up giving it away because it was just like, I want people to read it. I mean, the thing is, and what you guys have all echoed and what we've been echoing about when it comes to the indie stuff, getting the information out there, the names of the creators, the names of the books out there, getting more people to know it so that when they go to the shop and they see that name on the shelf, they're like, oh, he did that book. He did Axe Wielder John, whatever it is, we no longer exist in a place where comics are really mainstream. So we have to speak the good word of it. And you guys are shining examples at your stores that you do that, and I really appreciate that. And I wanted to ask, before we get going, two things. Each of you give me one indie book that you would like to spotlight that you've read recently, or a creator. And also let me know what's going on in the shops and what people out there can look forward to, and can they see you online also?
Well, if this is our parting farewell shots, I'm going to give my two books, indie-ish ones. I mentioned it earlier, but Mad Cave has a book called Spectrum coming out that there's been 4 issues of. And if you're a lover of music and the music industry, it is a very cool, almost kind of Grant Morrison-esque kind of take on paranoia and the kind of rebirthed creative musical spirit. So Spectrum. And then with what's going on with Hayden Sherman right now, and people having that name on their minds, Into the Unbeing is an amazing Dark Horse book that I forget Zach Thompson is writing it, and Hayden Sherman's been doing all the art. And if you've liked his art in Absolute Wonder Woman, check out Into the Unbeing. It's an incredibly unsettling book. It's fantastic. I'm going to let Django tell about. Oh, it's great. The first paperback came out not long ago. Great body horror from Hayden Sherman. Django is always a better indicator of hearing events that are going on in our shop. But I just want to mention, and I perhaps mention this every time I see Dave, but much like I said, I consider speculators to be a necessary part of the comic book ecosystem. The comic book ecosystem relies on so many parts, and comic stores and retailers are one part of that. But Dave, this podcast is another huge part of it. And I spent 8 years listening to podcasts religiously just like this before I started working in my comic shop. And just like we try to turn people onto the medium and be excited about it, this is doing that same thing. And I think it's incredibly important. And I consider kind of anybody that would be listening and watching this or ever contributing to it or working in shops, like we're all in this same team fighting for this thing that we love and making sure that it never is actually in that death spiral that people are always talking about it being. So big ups to you, Dave, for what you've been doing. And I'm glad to a year later get to be on this thing and see your house is looking great and your like all of that. And it's always awesome when you come to our store. So just thank you for having us and for all of this.
Of course.
Great. We get to follow that, Aaron.
Yeah.
Dave's pretty cool.
I was going to follow up with a complaint. I was going to say, Dave, if you could just move your live sales from Wednesday night to a more convenient time for me, because the amount of times you will post rad stuff, I'll be like, oh man, of course I'm not getting stuff out. I can't do this tonight. So yeah, that's my only gripe. Otherwise, flawless work, Dave.
I would say indie stuff. Neither of these is brand new, but they're the first two things that jumped into my mind that weren't what Jeff just said. Would be Holler by Jeremy Massey.
Oh, yeah.
Which is like rock and roll grommets without the blood.
You guys would both like that book.
So good. And then also Death of Power by what is his first name? Burdick.
Kurt
Burdick. And it is the most disgusting superhero parody you've ever seen. It's fabulously horrid.
It's so good.
Yeah. And I think number 4 had a Kickstarter that ended last year. I don't know if it's out or when it comes out.
It should be out pretty soon, I think.
It's like I can't recommend it to anybody, and I have to recommend it to everybody.
Well, that's
fabulous.
That's why I recommend Savage Street Vigilante, because it's in that same vein.
Nice. Yeah. As far as our stuff goes, Jeff and I are at the Comics Place a few times a week. Comics Place has we have Matt Rosenberg and Tyler Boss coming on April 25th, and then Free Comic Book Day, of course, on May 3rd. We've got some other big things coming up. We still have our small toy store, Comics Place Retro. We also have the Data Bros is our podcast with Brian Garside, and we run Comic Shop Assistant, which is an online comic focused point of sale system for comic stores and game stores.
And we got big things coming in October in Bellingham. Have you
right.
talked to Dave about that?
I heard about this.
Thing.
Yeah,
we got to recruit you to be a part of this thing.
We're working on a convention up in Bellingham. The previous Bellingham Comic Con had their last year in October, and we're going to take over the slot and move it to downtown Bellingham. Try to activate downtown and bolt on other businesses. Those are the buzzwords we're using. Well, activate, bolt on, activate, bolt on.
I will assemble there,
yes.
And I will be there with bolts.
Hell yeah.
Love it. Hell yes. Hell yes.
And Aaron.
Knowing full well that Image is not the most indie, but we're taking everyone down with us.
Yeah.
It is sincerely 100% my shit. Like the James Bond and evil robot angle for it hooked me, and then
Island of Dr. Moreau.
Realizing how Venture Brothers it was icing on the cake. It's so fun, and could not be more excited to have Rosenberg and Boss in for that tour. That's been my favorite thing recently, by far. And it also helps that that's our next event coming up.
Nice.
I'm gonna cheat and look at our calendar, because we have so much more stuff going on in the next few weeks than we normally do. We'll usually aim to do 1 or 2 events a month, but we've somehow got 6 in the next 2 weeks. So we've got Rosenberg and Boss signing on the 17th. We've got Superman Day on the 18th. We've got a WrestleMania party with our friend Tito Ricks at his card shop right down the street from our shop. We're going to be doing that on Sunday the 20th. On Saturday the 26th, we've got John Bailey, the voice of Jeff the Landshark in Marvel Rivals.
Yummy.
In the shop. And then Free Comic Book Day as well. And then we are once again already ramping up for San Diego Comic-Con. We start our planning about 6 months in advance, but three months beforehand is really when the rubber meets the road. So we're getting some stuff lined up. Very excited for that. So yeah, you can find us in San Diego at 1055 F Street, corner of F and 11th. We are open 11 to 7 every day.
All right. And
See you there.
And for anybody watching, links for all of the stuff that they mentioned will be down below. Social media for Now or Never and Comics Place, and you can visit Comics Place, get on their mailing list. Aaron, do you guys have a mailing list?
We do have an email list. Yep, you can sign up on the website nowornevercomics.com.
Cool. All right. Well, this concludes the first quarter, the first part of 2025 Roundtable Retail Around, whatever the fuck this is. This is me talking to my friends who happen to own comic shops, and I'm so glad that you guys are doing well. Oh yeah.
Oh, could I ask just one question of the group? Because I know we talked about tariffs and we talked about distribution stuff. How are we feeling about comics? Are even thumbs up, thumbs down? Are we excited for 2025?
Yes.
Hell yeah.
I think that's a really good sign that even with everything going on, that we are all still excited.
At least the comics are awesome.
Yeah, the comics are awesome. That's the thing. I've had more fun reading probably in the last 6 months than I have in the last couple of years. So.
Yeah. Same.
But yeah, that'll conclude this. I might actually put that at the beginning. That'll conclude this. I'd love to have you guys back on, and after we're done recording, I'm going to tell you about my next plan. But thank you so much, Aaron, Django, and Jeff. You guys rock.
Thanks,
Thank
Dave.
you.
Thank you all.
Okay, here we go. Thanks for watching. That was a lot of fun. I really enjoy the enthusiasm that Jeff, Django, and Aaron bring to this. It's great to see people that own comic stores that are enthusiastic about comics, that want to keep comics going, and want to also just prop up the creators and the people that make them, as well as treat their customers right. So if you are in San Diego at any point this year or next year or the year after, go to Now or Never. You can find their information down below, their website, their social media. If you're in northern Washington, specifically the most northern portion of Washington, Bellingham, go visit the Comics Place and their retro toy shop, which is right across the street. 2 shops for 1 city coming at you. You'll find all of their information down below. Anything that was referenced in the podcast, there will be a link for it down below. For my part, thank you for watching this. My name is Dave. This is the West Coast Davengers. I love comics. I want you to love comics as much as I love comics. I want you to love yourself, just like that song in the 90s. What's her name? I Touch Myself. Anyway, that's a different story. This isn't health class. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe. Check out my podcast, Direct Edition. I'll see you next week on the West Coast Davengers.